tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is collector Paul Ruscha and author Suzanne Reyto. Collector, calligrapher, photographer, author, Paul Ruscha was born in Oklahoma City, where he attended Central State University. In Los Angeles, he went to LACC, Los Angeles City College, and Chouinard Art Institute. I met Paul when his specialty was in graphic arts as a calligrapher. And what were you doing? Why were you doing calligraphy then? You had just come from Oklahoma, I guess,
yeah,
right?
And actually you had hired me.
That's how I met you?
Yes, exactly. And you had seen something I had done, and then you said that you needed to do some invitations to a party that you were throwing. And I think I'd just done Princess Anne's wedding invitations. And so you said, oh, I want something like that. So I did yours.
And you did the whole thing, didn't you? You did
the
paper
I did,
and the
designed it, and yeah.
And
we had fun.
The one thing that I remember was so great, and I didn't know if that's when I had met you or if I'd met you before. The one thing is when we took an invitation to Fidel Castro. And you made the invitation to him.
Right.
And I handed it to him. Then I took it back because I wanted it to say Fidel Castro by Paul Ruscha.
That's right.
But before that, Paul, you were doing museum work. I think that was kind of funny. You worked at the Acoustic Guide.
I started working for Henry Hopkins at the LA County, the old one, in Exposition Park. And he offered my brother Ed a job doing the acoustic guide desk, you know, sort of handing out these acoustic guides, which were like, you know, tape-recorded docents. And so he said, I don't want that job, I've got to paint. And so I said, okay, I'll take it. And so I worked there for a couple of years. And then I wanted to go to New York, and they said, well, let's transfer you to the Metropolitan. So I went from the LA County to the Metropolitan. And that's what I did.
Did the same thing?
Yeah.
That was your museum?
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, you're working with a lot of museums now, working in your brother's studio, Ed Ruscha.
That's right.
And doing...
Well, I kind of, I document everything he does as his photographer. I shoot all of his work in 8x10 and 4x5 and 35 and black and white and color, and then I coordinate with all of the curators who put his shows together that work, and so that's what I'm.
So that is your connection to the museum still now.
Now.
You can photograph for other artists.
I don't do the acoustic guys.
No more acoustic guys. Did you ever do hello? This is Paul Ruscha, and we're now seeing the Cezanne show.
No, I didn't, but Ed has actually done that. The one at the Museum of Modern Art, Ed has his. He waltzes people through the paintings that they own of his.
Oh, he does.
Yeah,
he does an acoustic
I think
taped.
a lot of all of the living artists, they've done that with their works.
Oh, that's great.
It is.
So was this really your way into the arts?
Not really. I mean, you know, Ed was an artist when he was in grade school, and then I followed Ed I was 4 years behind Ed in grade school, and so as soon as I got to the teachers that had been his sort of art. You know, focus at the time, they began to work on me in the same way, and so I've always made art.
But did you paint?
Yes, unfortunately I'm pretty colorblind, and so one of the teachers gave me special, you know, she gave me a special kind of time to make this portrait of a Canadian goose or a Canada goose. And I got to leave the classroom and go to the art room at the back of the class. And then about 3 weeks later, after I'd been working every day on this painting, she came back and screamed and said, "You fool! that is not a lavender bird, you know, and I painted it this weird color. And
But
so,
isn't that funny what teachers do to their
yeah,
students?
yeah.
Because the lavender
they encourage
bird
you, and then
sounds good to me.
yeah, and then they really
So I guess
mess it up for
maybe
you.
this pushed you into installation because of that big installation you did. You did a Doris Day dinner,
yeah, dinner for Doris.
and then you did just now. You did
Yeah.
dinner for Doris. What, 25 years ago?
35 years ago. This is the 35th anniversary.
Of dinner
Installation.
for Doris Day, and then the
Yeah.
new one is dinner with W.
Dinner for W.
So tell us
Yeah.
the Doris Day.
Well, I had
the
a
format.
studio at the Contemporary Arts Foundation in Oklahoma City, and I wanted to do a show because at the time I was the maitre d' at a restaurant, the best restaurant in town, and I, you know, had all this facility to you know, for dinner tables and fine china and all of that. And so I thought, well, I want to do something, and you know, as an artist that way. And so I put together this dinner table with all this great stuff and calligraphy, you know, their names. And it was Doris Day, and it was people in the news who were kind of at odds with one another in some way. Doris Day's challenged guest was Charles Manson,
I see.
because he had originally wanted to kill her son, Terry Melcher. And then the other guests were Andy Warhol and Valeria Solanas, who had
tried
shot
to
him.
kill him, yeah.
And Eldridge Cleaver and Lester Maddox.
Oh, it
and,
really was.
yeah.
Oh, so it had a
political thing, yeah.
But it had a tie to each other. The guests
Yeah,
had a tie
exactly.
to each other.
Yeah, and then the last couple in that batch of the dinner for Doris was Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas.
Oh,
Because
they
they
wanted
both
to
had-
kill each other, I bet.
Maria Callas wanted to kill her.
Exactly. And then the new one that
And then
you
the new
just
one,
did at
yeah, is
Burt Green Gallery.
yes, Burt Green Fine Art, and it is of Dinner for W, which is George Bush, and his counterpart is Saddam Hussein, and then Condoleezza Rice's partner is Osama bin Laden.
Oh, so you really did
Yeah.
tie those up
Oh, yeah.
too. But tell what the dinner table's a nice round
Oh,
table
yeah,
with
sorry.
flowers and
Right.
crystal and china.
And then the chairs are
sterling.
toilets, and the chairs around this table, and there's 8 toilets.
A
and,
complete toilet, the
yes.
water tank and the seat.
Right. And my nephew, Eddie, who is a musician, and a friend of his, Jason Mason, they made recordings of their toilets at their homes and
Flushing.
studios, flushing. And so I found these little boom boxes that fit right inside the toilets, and so those are going off at random around the table, and it's
And the napkins on
then-
the toilet. on
yeah.
the
Well,
back
they're
of the
they're
toilet.
actually napkins for your lapkins, and
Yes.
then there's a roll of toilet paper on the back of each toilet.
Each one. It
Yeah.
looks so pristine when
Yeah.
you walk in the gallery. It's very pristine. I know you do a lot of collections, but you do a collection of your people too, because you're doing this book
Yeah, right.
that is being published by a German company.
Steidl, Gerhard Steidl, and he has Steidl Publishing, which is a wonderful company in Germany.
And it's a story about a collection of your friends, I guess, right?
Well, it's the people that I collect, and most of them I know, and so it's how I met them, and you know, it's really more autobiographical, and I'm using them as an excuse to write about myself and my family, and much to my brother's chagrin, but
You write about Don McCarty,
yeah, Don McCarty and
an artist. Eve Babbitt's a writer.
That's right. She was a girlfriend of mine for many years, and so I've got a lot to write about her, but it should have its own book.
Ed Ruscha, your brother.
Yes, my brother, Joe Good,
Joe.
and you know, they're just artists that I've always known, and Shane Gaffog, he's big in it too, and because I have quite a bit of his
Well,
work.
that's an interesting thing, because another collection, another exhibition that's up downtown is a collection of your art that you
Yes,
own,
that I own.
that you've collected. So you collect people you talk about.
Yeah.
You collect memorabilia of presidents. You
Right.
collect. I'm going to show
Yeah,
this because
sure.
I think this is bizarre. This
That
is
was
a
my very
collection.
first collection, actually. Not those particular works, because I did the second show I had at the Contemporary Arts Foundation was called Anthony Appleworm's Scrapbook. And Anthony Appleworm was a nickname I was given in New York when I lived there. And the scrapbook was of my inspection stickers. And when I was in high school, I found this little slip in a new shirt that I'd bought that said inspected by number, 47 or something. And I thought, what a weird little message. You know, it's telling me something, that this shirt was actually held by somebody who checked it out, and so I became fascinated by that aspect of it, and I began to amass these things, and then pretty soon people
Are they
added
all
to the
your
collection.
own, or did they?
Yeah, sometimes friends would think, you know, I
Give
mean,
you
you can't stop
something?
the ball rolling when you do something like that, and other people supplement the collection as well, but most of those are things I've collected.
You also collect baseball caps.
Yeah, those were just, you know, because I like baseball caps.
But the thing that I think is bizarre about the baseball caps is they all have different names. The bills are all different sizes.
yeah,
they are actually, when I started thinking, it's not so weird. They are collectible.
Yeah.
They have different fastenings in the back.
Actually, I only began to collect those because I have two beams that run through my house. And my house is like a railroad train. It's long and skinny. And so I wanted to hide the beam because I didn't like the way it kind of bowed at one point. Now it doesn't. But then I liked the way the caps covered the beam.
That's what you did.
And so they stay there now. But, you know, there's like maybe 150 or 200 caps that hang
And they
across,
all must be
across
different.
the living room.
Different colors,
Yeah, all
different
colors.
styles. Some are
Yes.
square, some
Yes.
are roundish.
Some have fans in them. That's my favorite.
Oh.
A friend of mine gave me this fan that, you know, if there's a light on it, this fan goes off and goes into your face, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, 'cause
Let's go back to the artists that you collect, because
Yeah.
you're friendly with so many artists. You've
Sure.
been in the art world.
slept with a few of them, but we won't talk about that.
Okay,
in
let's
this.
not talk about that. I'm not going to get into gender issues here.
Okay.
But who is up in that show? That's it. It's at Pharmaca?
Yeah, Pharmaca and, or they say Pharmaca.
I was
excuse me.
going to say Pharmaca.
Like pharmacopoeia is all I can think about. And there's Shanga Fogg and Don McCarty, and Eve is not really an artist, but there's something of her in the show, and so a nude. And then John Brandenburg, who's a friend of mine from back home, he's an artist, and Shanga Fogg and Joe Good, and there's Tina Mione, who is a wonderful.
I love that
Yeah,
piece.
yeah, she's great. And Tina and Al are close friends of mine, and they live in Winslow, Arizona, and they bought this bizarre old hotel called La Posada. And Tina is a painter, and she paints big paintings. And
I love that piece. Her piece was
yes,
beautiful.
exactly.
And do you trade for those pieces?
Sure, I shoot Tina's work, and then she'll give me a painting, you know, that kind of thing. And that's how I came by those paintings. Except I think, yeah, no, I got the Nixon. She's also in my presidential wing. And
Oh, that's right. And also your brother's in the presidential wing.
that's right. All of Ed's work that I have there is none of his word works. They're just the president's.
I
And,
thought it was like Washington.
yeah, it's Washington's profile, and then you know, Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln's silhouettes, and
And those were in it
yeah,
too.
yeah, and but Tina and Al, they had a partner in their hotel, La Posada, and his name is Dan Lutzik, and he's the guy who did most of the sculpture, which is in the middle of the room.
Oh,
And I don't know if you knew it or not, but my mother is in the middle pot. Her cremains are.
No, is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, so it was a family affair.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
nephew was there the other night.
That's right,
Your
that's true.
mother's always there.
Yeah, and her portrait by Don McCarty was there, and my sister's portrait by McCarty.
Do
and
you keep your mother's
ashes?
ashes
yeah.
at home?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, everybody said, "Why don't you scatter them?" And I said, "God, are you kidding? It's the only time I ever had control over her, so why would I want to do that?"
Well,
So-
you've had control over us today. And really quickly before we leave, why
Yeah,
don't you show
sure.
us the last collection?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is a whole series that I did called The Loser, because I kept getting this stuff that was, you know, Paul Ruscha has won $10 million, and it's just a whole file full of this stuff. This is stuff I didn't use, but you know, it's the
It all came
sweepstake,
to your house.
clearinghouse kind of stuff. Yeah, it all came to the house. So anyway, that's what.
And what will you do with this?
Oh, do you remember that 8-foot thing that I did that had all of those things lined up?
Yes.
Like that. It was.
Oh, you used them.
And that's why it was called The Loser, was because I never returned these. See, I collect these things too, though. These are really great little things. And I
Right.
can,
I like that you have that they're small things to
Oh,
collect, because if you were
right.
collecting big things, you wouldn't have room for them all.
that's right. And Joan, you know, in my kitchen, every single square inch of the cabinets are covered with these things.
Those little things?
Yeah, I mean, you get them in everything nowadays, and so I just got tired of painting, you know, the kitchen. The earthquake messed everything up, so I just covered it, you know, and these stickers. So.
Paul, I think you've been a great inspiration to us today. I think it just tells us we can collect anything,
you
right?
You sure can. If you
Well, let me hold this up before you leave.
Yeah.
This is the Jackie Kennedy.
And there's an invitation that Ed got to the White House.
This is
Hillary,
from the White House.
Hillary Clinton sent it to him.
So this is your memorabilia
That's right.
of your...
Jack Kennedy. This is done in breadfruit. My sister and I found this in Venezuela, where she lives. And this is Newt Gingrich's gavel when he was Speaker of the House, but I can't stand Republicans, and so so I.
Paul,
and that's it.
Thank you so much for
You're
being
so welcome,
with
Joan.
us.
My pleasure.
And thanks for being with us this part of the show. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Suzanne Reyto. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with author Suzanne Reyto, who was born and raised in Hungary. Her book, Pursuit of Freedom, tells us all about that journey. Let's start with the struggles in Eastern Europe when you were young. You had to face Nazism, communism, leaving your home. How did this all start? Tell us what happened when you were a child.
Well, I was born during the Nazis, but really that part of my story in the book is through my mother's eyes and voice. However, it continued when I was quite aware, and I always say I was an only child, and I was more keenly aware of what was going on than if I would have had brothers and sisters to play with.
Oh, that's why.
And I think I spent more time with adults than usual, and spent most of my time with my parents or their friends. And when the communists came in after the war, the communists...
Where were you living? Tell us where that was.
I lived in Budapest.
I see.
And in a very nice neighborhood of Budapest. I would say the Beverly Hills of Budapest. And my parents did very well, and even after the war, as you know, unfortunately, as a result of war, usually there is prosperity and all of those things. So during that time, my father was able to establish a good life, but when the communists came in 1948, he could see the handwriting on the wall. And he felt it was best to leave, but couldn't leave so fast because of business commitment. And by the time we left in 1949, it wasn't so easy, and even though he paid off somebody, a border agent, somebody who was going to smuggle us across the border, unfortunately, after he was paid off, instead of taking us across to freedom to Austria, he kind of handed us over to the authorities.
I read that. I read that in the book, and it's like you can't believe what's happening because you think you're crossing the border, and the next thing you do, you end up in jail.
In jail as a 5-year-old.
And your mother.
And with my mother, standing next to my mother as her sentence was handed down, and the prison guards kidnapped me. And suddenly, as a 5-year-old little girl, no parents, nobody I know, and we're taken into a prison nursery where I had no idea where I was or if I will ever see my parents again.
Did you live alone then for a while?
We were separated for almost a year.
Oh, you were?
Well,
and your father was in another part of the jail somewhere.
The men and women were separated, but I was taken to this prison nursery where my parents didn't know where I was, and I really didn't know where they were. And neither of us knew if we will ever see one another again.
What happens in a situation like that? I know what I would think. I mean, your father pays off somebody to get out, and that person takes the money and then turns you in besides.
Unfortunately, that happens in all cases, but no matter what happens, you can't give up hope that there are decent people. People like that are doing whatever they're doing, but just because one out of many would have done it or did do it, it doesn't mean that everybody is like that.
That was during the communist time?
That was during the communist era.
So during the Nazi era, were you actually raised during that time?
I was born, believe it or not, 6 days before the German invasion of Hungary.
Oh.
And my mother and I were still in the hospital because
And
during
what
that
did they do?
time
They came into Hungary and...
they came into Hungary without much notice or fanfare, and there was a lot of commotion and gun-toting soldiers running around. And as bad as it was, they not only came into Hungary and took over, but they occupied the grounds of the hospital as their headquarters.
Oh, where you were the baby.
So I was a 6-day-old baby, and amazing stories. And you know, the book has so many of these stories that are just hard to believe, and as you read some of the things that are happening, you feel that you're learning history as well.
You mentioned your mother through your mother's eyes, and I see when I was reading it, there's a lot of italics. It's a lot of what your mother told you and stories that she told you.
I felt that there was so much of my mother's voice at the very beginning that it would be easier if it was in italic, which meant that it was her voice rather than mine. And I felt when I was writing the book, I wanted to be sure that it came firsthand. I think this is so important.
That it was
the
her
way
story.
I feel that I wrote the book, but I felt that her part of the story should be heard from her firsthand, because this book is the first one that was written by a survivor, if you want to call it, because I don't...
You're too young, really, to be a survivor, aren't you?
But I'm a survivor of both Nazism and communism.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And this is, you know, when I talk to students, youngsters in school, and I always tell them, you are the last generation that has the opportunity to meet a survivor firsthand.
Yeah, because they're all 90 years old, aren't they? And
my mother is 86.
Yeah, right.
And it's their responsibility to learn enough about it so that they can tell their children.
But as I was reading the book last night, you didn't just come to America, you went over to more of Europe, then to Australia, then all over. What kind of a journey was that?
Well, I always said this is the greatest country on earth, and the circuitous way was worth
it really was.
all that to get here. Because after Hungary, we went to Australia because, as you know, there was a quota system, and we couldn't get in here. So we had to go where there was some relatives who could sponsor us.
But some of the Jews went to China. Was it that time?
No, the ones who went to
earlier?
China were in the middle 30s, and then the Shanghai ghetto, the German Jews went in 1939.
Oh, because I had talked to someone who had done that too.
That was an
Ursula
amazing...
Bacon actually went from Germany to Shanghai. And it's like, here you are. And you were in the same situation in Australia. You didn't speak English.
Didn't speak English, although I learned under clandestine conditions, because once the communists came in, it was illegal to speak or to learn English. You know, anything Western was illegal and out of line, and anything in a capitalist way. But I not only lived in Australia and grew up, but when I came to the States and married my husband, he was in the U.S. Navy. So we lived on Guam on top of it. So how many people lived on that you know would live on Guam?
Exactly.
So I really have been around.
But the interesting thing, was he from the same area?
He was from Hungary also, but he had come directly to the States, and then I came here and we met.
But he didn't have any of those kind of experiences that you did? Why?
He had a lot less. My father was one of the biggest capitalists in the country, and his name was a household word.
I see.
And I think, you know,
So
sometimes
they
too good
attacked
is, yes, exactly. He was an immediate target no matter what.
I see, I see. So did you talk to other people when you wrote this book, or is it just your own story and your mother's story?
Well, it is mainly my story because there were many reasons why I decided to write the book, because originally I had no intentions ever to write, but with many, many reasons, but the main catalyst was my husband and I went to Hungary, and in Budapest a museum opened recently, and on one wall it's dedicated to the story that I experienced, and I felt that if it was good enough for a museum, it's good enough for the world to see, and that was really the main reason why I felt it was important to write the book.
Oh, so this was really something that just came to you a few years ago,
It
not
happened
over
within
your lifetime.
It happened within the last 3 years, because my parents always told me, walk and go ahead and look up and towards
look
the future,
forward, right.
never look back and never
Right.
dwell on the bad. And I felt that that's how I put it out of my mind. And I'm a very positive person. I always try to project a smile, and the pleasure and the opportunity to be able to live here in this great country that all of us should appreciate.
Isn't that true? That's so true. You had a successful business here. You had a travel agency, and you became president of the Hadassah.
I am still currently co-president of the Los Angeles area Hadassah, which is a very big job to make sure that everybody is looked after.
But it's worldwide, Hadassah?
Hadassah is a worldwide, the largest women's organization, but the beauty of Hadassah is that they do amazing work in the hospital in Hadassah in Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, it is nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for this year.
A group?
The Hadassah organization is nominated
Is that right?
because they treat everybody without regard to religion or creed or race.
But it's basically a Jewish organization.
It's basically a Jewish organization based in Jerusalem, the Hadassah Hospital. And if you can believe, some of the genetic disease research and some of the most unbelievable research starts at Hadassah Hospital.
That's so great. So you proved, coming from all this oppression, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there?
Well, I always say that there is a silver lining and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to be strong and take responsibility for yourself.
Yes.
And nobody's going to take care of you if you don't take care of yourself.
And having the freedom that we have is a responsibility as well.
Well, that's one of my mottos. Freedom is a very, very precious thing, but it comes with responsibilities. We must never take it for granted and always protect it and respect it, and definitely never abuse it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and being able to spread my message.
I'm glad. And thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. We'll see you next time.